list of details inside those scenes. They'll be categorizing every bullet casing. They'll be combing through surveillance footage. It's time-consuming work, but the experts say without it, you can't get the answers that we're all searching for.
Because understand what investigators are trying to do. They are trying to piece together a timeline, not just from the shooting on, but prior to the shooting, because, motive is going to be so incredibly important here, especially, if we do end up having a trial. And also think about the closure that this community is ultimately going to need. Everybody's asking now, why? Why would this happen in our community? Why did he target these locations and these people? And closure is an important way for family members, friends, and really the entire community to be able to eventually move on from this.
Now, Betsy Smith with the National Police Association, who you just heard from, says all the evidence that's being collected right now will also be key if Robert Card is found alive and eventually faces a trial for these crimes. We had a lengthy conversation with her in our digital studio this afternoon, which you can watch on our website right now. And I'll have more on what the I-Team is learning about the tips that are coming in regarding Robert Card coming up at 5:30. Marissa?
Dan, thanks so much. A volunteer kids bowling coach, a high school freshman, and his father, plus heroes who fought back.
With each passing hour, we are learning more about the people who lost their lives Wednesday night. There are 10 victims that we know of so far. 8 more have been identified now by the medical examiner. Their names not yet released to the public. Joseph Walker was the manager at the bar. His father says that he died trying to stop the suspect with a butcher knife.
Joshua Seal was taking part in a deaf cornhole tournament in Lewiston when he was killed, according to his wife. Seal was a beloved sign language interpreter. He was often interpreting the governor's COVID-19 updates. Bath Iron Works says 40-year-old Peyton Brewer Ross was also killed at the deaf cornhole tournament at Schmenge's Bar and Grill.
Now, Arthur Strout's father says his son was also killed at the bar. He says he dropped his son off there just minutes before those shots rang out. And Bob Violet is retired and devoted his free time to coaching kids learning to bowl. His youth bowling league was practicing at that bowling alley when he was killed.
Ron Morin's family tells the BDN he was a gregarious, upbeat guy. He also died in the shootings. Trisha Aslan's sister was bowling with her at Just in Time Recreation when the shooting started. She says her sister was calling 911 when she was killed.
Now, Brian McFarland was a member of the deaf community, also killed at Schmenge's Bar and Grill. And finally, a father and a son, a teenage son from Winthrop, Bill Young, his son Aaron, gunned down there at the Rampage at the Just in Time Recreation bowling alley.
The tragedy in Lewiston is hitting the deaf community especially hard. Police say 4 of the people killed Wednesday were a part of that community. CBS 13's Asia Reed joins us live. And Asia, you spoke with some folks who knew them.
Greg and Marissa, we are set up right near Schmenge's Bar where one of those shootings happened. As you can see behind me here, we're not right on site. We are at the end of the road. Media is not allowed to pass by at this time, but it has been confirmed that 3 people who are deaf were killed that night, one of them being Brian McFarland. Now, earlier today, I caught up with one of his friends who says that he just randomly recently moved to Maine. All right, I'm going to send it back
to give
over
an
to you
update to the public about the shooting and the
there
search for the suspect.
Yeah, again, Asia, thank you so much. But we do want to go to Lewiston City Hall right now. We're getting an update from law enforcement right now. Let's take you there.
A little bit of the setup from earlier today, and again, as we continue to evolve, right? Lots of podiums. We lost our maps. The whole thing was a little bit of a mess earlier, to be quite honest. And our victims in this investigation and the people that are doing the work deserve better than that. So I would also tell you that we're kind of looking for a larger venue as well. The chains here and everything else seems to work. We're going to use some technology for some pictures here right off the bat. So I would say that, again, thank you for joining us. It's been a busy day for our law enforcement officers and our partners around the state. I'm going to give some updates from what we found, but the real primary reason I wanted to bring you back in today was we wanted to really identify the victims. and show their pictures. We won't get into family backgrounds and their lineage at all, but we do want to show those pictures, give ages. I would say that the families didn't want hometowns listed. They do certainly deserve and want some privacy around these issues, which makes complete sense. And we're going to start with that component of our information simply because that's why we're here, right? This is about the victims. That's why we do what we do, and that's why we're striving so hard, and that's why you're here, because you care about them as well. So we're going to go ahead and load that behind us here on the screen. And I think Shannon Moss can also put that information out following this. Some specifics here, I would just like to note that the families actually approved these photos, sent these photos in to us for a lot of different reasons. I think some of them show a little of their character, a little of their relationships, and some other specifics. You'll just see, again, a picture, a name, an age, and then there's a couple symbols there. And we wanted to be specific enough to what location they ultimately lost their lives at. And again, thank the families for allowing us to even do this. They certainly didn't need to do that. They're working through their own struggles, and rightfully so. So I'm going to start with this and then ask for just a moment of silence before we continue on to our next agenda item. But that top left, as you see it, and that is Ronald G. Morin, 55. And I won't read the venues. You can put that all together yourself. Peyton Brewer Ross, 40 years of age. Joshua A. Seal, 36 years of age. Brian M. McFarland, 41 years of age. Joseph Lawrence Walker, 57. Arthur Fred Strout, 42. Max A. Hathaway, 35. Stephen M. Vozella, 45. Thomas Ryan Conrad, 34. Michael R. Deloria, II, 51. Jason Adam Walker, 51. Tricia C. Asselin, 53. William A. Young, 44. Aaron Young, 14, his son. Robert E. Violette, 76, and his wife, Lucille M. Violette, 73. William Frank Brackett, 48 years of age. Keith D. McNair, 64. Just have a moment of silence. Thank you. Thank you for that. Truly, truly appreciate it. And we do, again, appreciate that to the family. They did give us those photos. I did not, however, have any of the family members pronounce any of those last names, so certainly no disrespect intended if in any way screwed up the pronunciation. So to move on, I would also like to address the numbers of the victims that that I confirmed earlier today with the number 8. And I will tell you that's miscommunication on my part. I was wrong. In talking to our detectives, we had a list for people that had been identified and family members that had been notified. There's also a separate list that involved family advocacy and whether or not they had been plugged into that. So the reality here is that all 18 of those victims, everybody that we listed here today, everybody has been identified and their families have been notified. So we were in contact with them. I would expect some more information later tonight, and I'll definitely talk about it tomorrow morning at 10. reference to Family Information Center, a new location, and some material around that, exactly what services will be available at that particular time. But I definitely wanted to make sure that I correct that mistake from earlier. So several other updates from this morning's briefing. I know that Shannon has sent along the aerial maps that we showed or tried to show here on the board, so you have received those. I also think that we had, and Shannon has corrected this as well, but the Pejubscot boat ramp, the proper name there was the Paper Mills Trail and Miller Park boat launch. The address was correct at 501 Lisbon Street. Pejubscot is a little bit further down the river, apparently, and we certainly like and appreciate everybody working with us to make sure that we had the proper location, the proper terminology for that. And other additional updates, the boat launch search of the river, the Androscoggin, they're still out there right now, and they'll be there as long as they can based on the light. And as we mentioned earlier, we're talking about sonars and grid searches and things of that nature. That's time intensive. It's taken them a while to work through there. They want to make sure they do it right. So we're not going to finish that search this evening. I would be surprised if you ever saw divers in the water overall. But tomorrow we'll have additional dive resources available to us from out of state, as well as some additional in-state teams. So again, we'll discuss that a little bit at 10 o'clock tomorrow. But no surprises. We expect that to go over, and that we'll have some assets there tomorrow. They did a bunch of flyovers this morning, as I mentioned. They did the sonar searches, some side, some ROV, and we'll be back on that tomorrow. The bar scene itself, they continue to do their on-scene investigation there, as well as at the bowling alley. They did check those wood lines. They may be back in there tomorrow as well, but that is progressing as expected. And I think another major piece of updates for you now is to talk about the shelter-in-place order and where that's going effective immediately. And I'm not a big reader of orders, but I think this is important that you hear this directly from a couple different sources. We're going to put out a release. There's going to be a cell phone geofence release to some folks. We've used that a couple times already during the active shooter as a warning and otherwise. But the shelter-in-place order is rescinded, except hunting is prohibited in the towns of Lewiston, Lisbon, Bowdoin, and Monmouth, beginning Saturday, 10/28/24, until further notice. The state police continue to search in Lewiston, Lisbon, Bowdoin, and Monmouth for the suspect, Robert Card, and recommend individuals remain vigilant. Businesses may choose to open or remain closed. Commissioner Camuso from IF&W is here to help us answer any additional questions about that hunting piece. It was asked this morning, and it was a good question, and I told you at that time that we were working on an answer for that. And what that means is that the general shelter in place has been rescinded. Specifically, hunting, again, is prohibited in those 4 towns, and those 4 towns only. And it's important that I mention that because the rest of the state is allowed to continue with their resident-only day on Saturday, tomorrow. And what does that mean? That means that there are going to be communities that hear gunshots from time to time because they're going to be hunting. So we would ask everybody to use caution in that and not think that every one of those gunshots is directly regarding this particular crisis situation, this investigation. So clearly, if they think, if they're suspicious, if they're concerned, they can certainly call their local agencies. But I would ask them to think about that, where they're located, when do they hear that? If they're 150 miles north, do they need to call their 911 center and create a response? And I think I would say no to that unless they have another set of facts, a fact pattern that would believe them that there's a direct connection between that gunfire and what they've heard to this point. So we had mentioned why we made that decision initially because of the crisis and the situation that we had. Those 4 towns in particular, clearly with Lewiston and the 2 tragic situations here, the 2 locations we've already talked about. And then you have Lisbon with the boat launch, Bowdoin where the suspect live. In Monmouth, there's other family connections in that particular area as well. So this is not to say that the crisis is over, the emergency is done, we can go about our lives as life is good. We want our folks, we want our residents to remain vigilant and to pay attention to what we share for information. I again focus on what we share is in the Department of Public Safety in the city of Lewiston, because we continue to see a lot of information from a lot of different places that is far from accurate. I would also say in that regard, when we say that we're going to meet you here at 10, we're going to meet you here at 10. And when we say we're going to notify you, we are going to notify you in the afternoon if we're going to get together and what time that is. I just encourage you to believe that until I prove you wrong, and I won't. And I say that because we've heard some other stuff. There's going to be a press conference at 1 o'clock. And then our PIO, who's incredibly busy, gets 100 emails that says, is it going to be 1 o'clock or is it going to be this? And you've got a job to do, I get it. And we're trying to help you do your job. And if you could help us do our job, that would be greatly, greatly appreciated. So that is some of those pieces for updates from what we worked on this morning. A couple of additional things. Neighborhood canvases, as an example. I did not speak to that. So we talked about large deployments of officers in various locations. What would that look like? Neighborhood canvases could be a couple of officers knocking on a door. And that's going to be happening at various locations around this particular area in multiple towns. Again, if somebody's using their own common sense and they say that doesn't seem right, then sure, call. But you could have 2 uniformed officers or 2 officers with clearly displayed badges jumping out of a marked car to come talk to you as detectives. There was a question this morning around arrival times at the 2 locations, and we had done some research on that, which was hot off the presses walking out the door to come here today. So spare time, as we had mentioned earlier, that initial 911 call occurred at 6:56 p.m. And by the CAD system, or the computer-aided dispatch system, so somebody calls in on a radio and they says, now I'm out at that location. The first Lewiston officer arrived based on that system at 7 p.m., so 4 minutes later. The reality there, however, is that there were 4 plainclothes police officers that were shooting on the range in that general area. They hear that call come in, and they're walking into the bar, or rather the bowling alley, in about a minute and a half. So they don't have radios, they weren't in uniform, they hear it as they're at the range, they respond to the address immediately, and then they address the threat and clear the building. For that same location, right, spare time, as an example, you have Lewiston, it's a self-contained police department, they work with everybody, so it's not uncommon to see the Maine State Police in town, but they don't have specific areas to patrol. Calls came in to dispatch centers for the Department of Public Safety that would control the Maine State Police, as an example, at 6:57, so a minute-ish later, and we didn't have necessarily troopers right inside the town, so 11 minutes later our first trooper arrives, which is not uncommon actually, and that's a pretty good response time considering it's an urban atmosphere and troopers aren't here. The second set of calls, as we've discussed, came in at 7:08, so this is the bar and grill. And the first Lewiston officer is responding there at 19:13 or 7:13 p.m., so 5 minutes later. And then really it becomes exponential after that, as an example. Should have mentioned this earlier, but spare time, a minute after those initial officers respond, 8 more are there. Now we're saying now everybody's starting to roll in about the same time, and about 10 officers are responding to the bar and grill immediately thereafter. You got the first folks, and then people are just showing up from the police department and other locations. And that particular call for service for the Maine State Police through Department of Public Safety dispatches, we got that second call at 7:10, about 2 minutes later than the Lewiston Center received it, and we had officers responding and arriving 3 minutes later. So why is that? They're already flying to the first address, and now we got a second call, and now they're diverting to that second call. So it's obviously they're in town, and they're running hard to that location. So those are the arrival times that I was asked about earlier today. I think based on the list that I made this morning, I think that's all we had for information. And I'll just call that kind of updates and follow-ups, things that I knew you were asking. There were some additional questions from the general public which has been good for us to receive those through these, right? They get a chance to see stuff, and then they reach out and say, what does this mean? We had a bunch of people reach out about that shelter in place, and what does that mean, and what should I do, and what does that look like? And rather than answer those through conversations with city staff, city leadership, police chiefs, we decided to rescind that order again, but recommend that people remain vigilant as they move forward. So I do appreciate them reaching out, and all of that contact has something to do with our ultimate decision. You know, where do we go from here? So with that in mind, that's the information that I was asked, and the information that I can update. We do have, I believe, the suspect picture up here as another piece. And the reason that we did this is because it's been quite some time. We've seen that photo, and you have a bunch of different photos. This, in fact, has more of the physical description of his height and weight, and his more official hair and eye color. You could guess at that based on some of the photos that you see, but why do that if we can directly give you that information? So if you could freshen up any material that you have there. It does again show that brown hooded sweatshirt and dark colored cargo pants that are in the photo that we had released earlier, which showed him walking in to spare time with that firearm. So I think that's the information that I wanted to get out to you today. I appreciate you coming back or holding on. I know you have long days and long nights, so that piece you were going to be around anyway, I'm sure. But I am, again, happy to try to take some questions and answers. The chief is here as well, but we did want to keep this tight from an operational standpoint. So, yes, sir.
Go back to the timeline.
Yeah.
4 officers who were at the range, I think, right? So can you just go over that again?
Yeah, sure. So officers are required to qualify a certain number of times a year, right? So in this particular instance, the officers are in plain clothes. They're shooting at a range right around the corner. The call comes in. They hear that, and they're going to respond, which just speaks to when these things happen, everybody's going. You could be a detective, the chief's bailing out of the station, you could be wherever. Everybody goes. So being Lewiston officers, they go, we know where that is. Everybody gets in the car, and they immediately go to spare time, to help in any way they can, not knowing that, in fact, they're going to be the closest there and the first out. So that cuts almost 2.5 minutes off the original or the initial uniformed police officer's response. And that's not uncommon from a police standpoint. Sometimes you got months where you're thinking, boy, I'm right around the corner when all this stuff happens. And sometimes I'm on the other side of the city when other stuff happens. We're very, very lucky that the officers were that close, because I think you save lives with time responses. And in an urban atmosphere, depending on where everybody is and how busy the night is, that response could have been much longer than that. Yes, sir.
Have there been any credible sightings of the suspect by either law enforcement or the public since the shooting took place?
Yeah, so we have, again, 530 plus tips and leads that have come in. Some of those have been sightings, some of those have been, and I would say as simple as, but hey, I've got a vacant house that's in this location. I own a barn that I'm afraid to go to. There's something over here that concerns me. So those things run the gamut. And I'm also going to use that opportunity that the FBI supervisory agent in charge, Jody Cohen, who has been with us during these press conferences, we gave that digital video information out this morning. There's already well over 100 entries in that system. So that means you're putting that information out, and the general public is grabbing hold of that, wanting to be involved, and sending that information in. So I thank you for that, and we certainly thank the FBI for their assistance with that kind of material. So we've got all kinds of, if somebody may say,
Has law enforcement seen him in the last 2 days?
We have not. Law enforcement has not seen him in the last 2 days. But again, in that stack of that 500 plus, you may have somebody that says, hey, we see somebody that looks like that. So we have not, but go ahead, ma'am.
Can you confirm that the note found at the suspect's home is a suicide note? That has something to do with doing the sheltering place?
Yeah, I cannot, and I'm not going to speak to the note itself. I acknowledge the fact that a note existed this morning, but I'm not going to get into exactly what it contained. But, sir?
Sir, you said that the officers, plainclothes officers who responded, addressed the threat, cleared the building. Can you explain what happened there?
Sure. When I say address the threat, they're going in the door addressing an active shooter. So they're going in prepared to do whatever they need to do to make that scene safe. On that particular time, the suspect is no longer there. They're going in as if they were. So the first thing you do is you go in and clear that location, make sure it's safe, and then you start working with victims and triaging people and trying to make sure that you're getting additional units there as fast as possible. So, yes, sir.
I wonder if when the officers arrived at the second scene, the suspect was still there, or whether by the time the first responders had arrived, the suspect had already left. And secondly to that, outside of the area of Lewiston and the surrounding communities, you talk about the work that's going on further afield, you know, and the suspicion that we might have been able to flee a bit further than that, potentially even outside of the state.
Yeah, sure. So the suspect was not at the second location when the officers arrived. As we discussed this morning, we showed those 3 maps as specific areas we knew we were definitely going to be working in, and then we've also cleared other areas that are farther afield. Somebody may again say, you know, there's a barn over there, there's an outbuilding over there, there's some family property that somebody's uncle owns, and can you check that? So as those things come in, some of those are kind of on the checklist to begin with, and then some come in real time. Because as those leads come in, we do look at those and then we farm them back out to either tactical units that are looking on that apprehension side or investigative units that can go out and do additional interviews. Well, at this point, you know, we are cognizant of all possibilities. We're not closing off anything because we want to make sure that we're being as comprehensive as we can with these particular searches. Yes, ma'am?
We noticed earlier there was extensive work of the presence in Gordon meeting. What can you tell us about what that was about?
In what town? Durham. Okay, yeah. So, and that's a situation where I heard that on the radio. Somebody had reached out to say that somebody may ask that question today. So we did look at that. There was a location there on a street in Durham where there were 2 911 hang-up calls. 911 hang-up calls happen on a regular basis. Depending on where they are, you may go, okay, wait a second. And then we had a second call. And then there was a sheriff's deputy that responded to the scene and then ultimately did not answer their radio, right? So you go 911 hang up, okay, wait a second, the officer that responded is not talking. That could be for a lot of different reasons. Again, based on the circumstances, we're certainly concerned about something like that. So officers did respond, made sure that he was safe, the scene was safe, and they moved on. So there was no direct connection to the suspect in this scenario, at least in today's call for service. Yes, sir.
Have you at this point secured or gone to all the residents, every place where he had lived previously? Have you gone to each one of those homes? And additionally, at this point, have you executed all available search warrants? Search warrants at the houses, at his
Yep.
car, social media, electronics. Have you put all of those search warrants in, or there's still others?
There's still a lot of work to be done around the search warrant side of the house, just based on workload alone. I don't know, however, you know, have we searched every house that he's had over the last amount of time? Certainly the ones that most recent. There's a Bowdoin connection, which caused a bit of a stir last night. That was a location we were concerned about. You know, our reality from a homicide investigation, as an example, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, you may have done 1 or 2 search warrants. Based on electronic devices and everything else, you could do up to 30 search warrants on 1. So this kind of situation, clearly there's going to be a lot of affidavits, a lot of work to be done around that. So we're working with the U.S. Attorney's Office, the Attorney General's Office. Federal entities are assisting with these warrants. That's an all hands on deck. You just never know, I'm going to open this device and that's going to be the one, right? So we've farmed that out to make sure we're making as much progress as possible. And I'm sorry for waiting. Go ahead.
By the end of this weekend, temperatures are supposed to plunge in the area. How is that going to complicate the search, or are you hoping that it actually might help investigators and be a problem for your suspect?
Yeah, so I think that goes in 2 different directions, right? We certainly have a lot of resources coming for the river tomorrow, because it would be nicer if it's sunnier, you can get a better look into the water. So that's one angle. If it's colder, there's an argument to be made that your thermo style of equipment, where you're looking for body temperatures or heat signatures, may work better in that scenario. So it does definitely vary. If it's cold for the suspect, it's certainly cold for our officers as well, and all those different things. We're certainly prepared and willing to do all those things, but that's where we're at. So yes, sir.
Can you discuss some of the reasoning behind why you removed the shelter-in-place orders in these 4 towns where you acknowledged you're still actively searching? And secondly, do we know how many weapons Card had or has in his possession?
The second question is no, I don't know how many he has or had. If there are weapons within that residence, that'll be part of the search warrant and counting those things out. And the decision to release that or rescind that shelter-in-place order is something that we've discussed internally as command staff members at the CP and saying, okay, we're looking at pros and cons, right? We've got communities that are locked down, that are shut down. There are families and schools and pharmacies and all those things. So we knew going in and have acknowledged that repeatedly, that we know that that can have a negative impact on people. So the other side of that is we had very pointed threats early on reference to these locations and nothing specific since then. So you have to look at that and you have to do the math on that and say, so are we more comfortable? Are we doing more harm than good by keeping people away from these clinics and their doctors and in schools? And while this is still absolutely a dangerous situation without question, we've got to make recommendations and ask the people that we serve, ask the people that we protect to be vigilant, to pay attention, to listen to what we have to say. If you see something, say something. Because you know in most cases, you're like, I don't like that. That looks strange. We can feel that, especially when you live in neighborhoods, right? That you live there, you're comfortable with that. That deal, that car is wrong coming down my driveway at this particular time of the day. What is going on? So that we don't come to those decisions to go into the order or come out lightly by any stretch of the imagination. But we do appreciate all the input from everybody about what does that mean and how it's impacted me as a person, right? So I appreciate that. Yes, sir?
Commissioner, is there any reason to believe that he may have obtained another vehicle since you already found his car, or may have gotten on his boat and gone down the river?
All possibilities are open to us. I don't have anything specific reference to that particular question. The next steps, where did he go after that and what was he in or not? Which is why we have feelers out in all directions. Is that a possibility? Sure. Is the river a possibility? Sure. We're going to continue to work those things until we're comfortable that those things have mitigated to the best of our ability, right? Because some of these locations we serve a search warrant on doesn't mean we're done, right? We may actually go back and continue a search and new information and go back and check a location again. So all of those things are absolutely available. Sir, right here?
Are there now 18 winter arrest warrants?
That's a good question that I don't know the answer to. I know that the Attorney General's office told us this afternoon that they were trying to complete the rest of those warrants in a timely fashion. Now that those individuals had been identified and the families notified. I'll have that answer for you tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock for sure. And right here, ma'am, sorry.
Yes, and two questions. The first is whether you can confirm that police found a gun in Card's car, the one that the suspect's car, the one that was discarded.
Mhm.
And secondly, I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about what communication has been like with law enforcement in other on the border states like Canada, New Hampshire, even Massachusetts, and specifically whether or not there's any expectation or any plan to put the border checks in place as a suspect continues to potentially be moving.
Yeah, sure. So we won't speak to evidence, specific evidence. Did you find something here? Did you find something there? I completely understand why the question is valid, but it's not something we're prepared to talk about, certainly this early on in an investigation. I can tell you that I've been in contact with all of our border states or country. New Brunswick reached out to the governor. The commissioners from our border states reached out to me immediately the day of and have reached out to me multiple times since then. Again, a lot of their officers are with us at this point, right? New Hampshire is up here, Massachusetts is up here, you name it on the federal side of the house, they are here. So everybody's really working hard on that side of it. There's no expectation at all that there's gonna be some kind of a border checkpoint scenario. But I'm gonna take one more call, one more question here from you, ma'am.
Question for the chief.
Oh, absolutely.
Chief, for members of law enforcement, especially from Lewiston, Auburn, and this close-knit community, can you talk about what it's been like to do this investigation when they may have close connections to some of the victims?
It's been very difficult, I can tell you that for certain. Seeing these pictures come up on the board, I know a couple of them myself. There are many law enforcement officials that I know some of these victims, and it's certainly very challenging. Try to go into a situation very objectively and, do a very thorough job knowing that you know this person that it's affected, or, a family member or a friend. Very difficult. I can tell you that all of the police officers I know from the area remain very professional at all times, and we press on and we get the job done.
Chief, just quickly, if you could complexities are you dealing with? 50 showcasing hundreds? What are just some of the complexities involved?
Yeah, again, the state police has the lead on this investigation. I can't comment on that. I can tell you that in scenes that I've investigated personally or that I've been to, it happens a lot. It takes a long time to process these scenes. It's nothing that happens in a quick manner, like Mike mentioned earlier this morning. It doesn't happen in an hour and the case is solved. These things take time.
Commissioner, is the boat still missing?
I'm not prepared to answer that question, but I do appreciate that. And as I mentioned, thank you very much for being here. We really do appreciate that. And we'll continue to strengthen this partnership and get out as much information as we can. So have a nice evening. Thank you. 10 o'clock tomorrow.
And you've been watching a live briefing from that State Police Commissioner, Public Safety Commissioner Michael Sawchuk, as well as Lewiston Police Chief St. Pierre speaking as well. Again, the big takeaway from the meeting here today, among several obviously, but of most impact to the broader public here watching right now, is of course that the shelter-in-place order has now been rescinded effective immediately, with the exception, and there were a lot of questions about this throughout the day, the hunting season begins more broadly here in Maine tomorrow, and what they're saying right now is the exception to the shelter-in-place order, they're asking people not to hunt in 4 specific communities. Lewiston, that's obvious. Lisbon as well, a lot of the investigation's been there, but also Bowdoin, where the Card family has homes, and Monmouth, which we just learned, we actually knew there had been some searches in Monmouth yesterday. Dave Eade was reporting on that. We're now learning that there are other family connections to the Card family there in Monmouth. So no hunting in those 4 communities until further notice.
And we also got the full list of the identities of the 18 victims. You know, they put up a board with all of their photos. They walk through the whole list. They range in age from 14 to 76. So all of them at this point have been identified. Authorities say all of the families have also been notified. They also gave a little bit more in terms of detail when it comes to the timeline of all of this, when the first 911 call came in and how quickly police responded. The commissioner says the first call came in about the shooting at the bowling alley. That was 6:56. He says 4 officers were the first to arrive. They were actually at a shooting range just around the corner in plain clothes. They got there a minute and a half after the first call came in.
Which is amazing to think.
So incredibly quickly, and said they went in to address the threat right away. The suspect was not there at the bowling alley. Then, of course, we had the second scene over at Schmeggy's Bar and Grill. The call for that one came in at 7:08, and the first officers arrived 5 minutes later at 7:13.
And also not there anymore.
Yeah, same thing. Robert Card, the suspect, also not at that scene. Giving us more details.
Just how quickly.
Quickly.
Yeah, and what we don't know is obviously what was the lag time between the first shots fired and the first 911 call. You know, most importantly, perhaps at just-in-time or spare-time bowling. Obviously, you've got to think that those calls came pretty darn quickly after the bullets started to fly. But it also gives you a sense of just how quickly officers were there, but also how quickly this suspect apparently was moving with murderous intent. We also learned that they are going to continue to search the river, a very big focal point on the Androscoggin River at that boat launch in Lisbon. But they're probably suspending that in-water search here within minutes. The sun going to be going down very, very soon. And they'll be resuming that again tomorrow morning. And
also one other thing the commissioner mentioned was, you know, with the hunting season starting tomorrow, except for in those 4 towns, he said, you know, keep in mind you might hear gunshots. But don't assume that they are in any way connected to this crisis situation, because there will be people out hunting tomorrow. Right. But also, with the shelter-in-place lifted, still be very, very vigilant.
Well, nerves are frayed at this point, and obviously the hunting season is going to go on. But obviously, anyone who's a hunter, obviously you know what to do. But be especially careful, vigilant, respectful to how other people may feel. If you're on public land or posted property, wherever it is, where you have permission to hunt. Anyway, in the meantime, though, let's go out to CBS 13's Brad Rogers. He's been following more details about this as well. He joins us live now. Brad, again, what's going on there?
Well, I tell you what, you know, you hear that list, there's just so many victims, so many senseless tragedies there. And that includes right here in Winthrop. Here in Winthrop, there was a husband and father who was shot and wounded. They've had a high school student's uncle was one of the victims. Also, a local school teacher's close friend was another of the victims. And a father and his teenage son were also both shot and killed at the bowling alley.
Among the first people killed by the gunman Wednesday night were 44-year-old Bill Young and his 14-year-old son, Aaron.
Losing one would have been hard enough, but losing both of them. It's just awful.
Kayla Putnam lost her stepdad and younger brother. She says the two of them like to go bowling together. She still can't believe they're gone.
I mean, I'm still having moments now. Every 5 minutes, I'm like, this can't be real.
She says Aaron was the baby of the family. He was a freshman at Winthrop High School.
He gave the best hugs. He was such a sweet kid, never talked bad about anybody or anything, and he was an honor student.
This kid has been in schools since kindergarten here, so I think that the ripple effect is beyond our comprehension.
As for Kayla's stepdad, she says he was the rock of the family, the one everyone would turn to in times like these.
He was, anchor of the family, just a great guy. He's going to be very, very missed, and it's very hard to cope without him right now.
Winthrop Superintendent Jim Hodgkin posted this. Sadly, we have learned that a freshman at the high school and his dad are among the victims that were killed. Additionally, the uncle of another high school student was also killed. This is a tremendous tragedy for our area, our town, our students, and everyone. My heart is broken by this.
Everyone was someone's son, daughter, brother, sister, parent.
Kayla is especially worried about her mom, who right now is distraught over the loss of her husband and son. How's your mom doing?
Devastated. Just absolutely devastated.
Alone, all these families hurting tonight. Now, crisis teams will be at Winthrop schools when they reopen on Monday. The school will open 2 hours late to give counselors a chance to talk to the teachers there as well. We're live in Winthrop. Brad Rogers, CBS 13 News. Back to you.
Brad, thank you. The deaf community is still grieving the loss of several people who died at Schmenke's bar on Wednesday night.
Yeah, we do want to take you back to CBS 13's Asia Reed. Again, she was speaking to us about some of those folks who lost loved ones just before we had, obviously, the briefing. Asia, again, just a tragic story out there as well.
Greg and Marissa, I'm set up right near the bar. As you can see behind me, media is not allowed to be there on site, so we're set up right down the road here. And it has been confirmed that 3 members of the deaf community were gunned down that night at Schmenke's bar, one of them being Brian McFarlane. Now, earlier today, I caught up with a close friend of his, Vicky Ash, who says he just recently moved to Maine to pursue his dream job. His very first day of his new job was a day before he was killed. Ash says she found out about his death through social media.
I thought my friend told him, "You okay?" Didn't hear from him. I thought maybe it's okay. Cause I panicked. I called him. I FaceTime. I called him. He said, "Please answer the phone."
2 other members of the deaf community died that night too, some of them at the bar for a boys' night out to play cornhole. This obviously hitting the deaf community hard tonight. Ash says she's still trying to grapple with the death of one of her very close friends. Live in Lewiston, Asia Reed. Back to you guys.
Asia, thank you. So many heartbreaking stories. And as you heard earlier, the shelter-in-place order has been lifted for Lewiston after being in place for almost 48 hours. That can certainly take a mental toll on folks. CBS 13's Anna Coon spoke to some Lewiston residents who were sheltering. And Anna, how are people there feeling at this point?
Well, Marissa, over the past few days, residents have had to drive quite a far distance for supplies like food and medicine, since most grocery stores and pharmacies in the area have been closed and remain closed now. Now that shelter in place is lifted, that may change tomorrow, but life here is far from normal for these residents. One resident I spoke to said things like going back to work, they're just out of the picture. She says to go back to her, she said she was able to go back to her office today, but that building is right next to the bowling alley and is actually considered part of the crime scene. She was escorted into her building by a police officer this morning so she could get laptops and other equipment that her team needs in order to work from home, but said being back there, it was so hard to see the bowling alley and the crime scene behind those barricades.
Same for the rest of our employees. Like, who knows how long it's going to be before they're even comfortable coming there, just because of what's going to play in your mind as soon as you see the building.
Again, just minutes ago, that shelter-in-place order was lifted, so some businesses may open back up tomorrow, but that is, of course, up to their discretion, with many here still on edge since the manhunt is still on. Live in Lewiston, Anna Kuhn, CBS 13 News.
All right, thank you very much, Anna. Meantime, hundreds of law enforcement officers have been joining forces trying to bring this massive manhunt to an end. As Gabrielle Caracciolo reports tonight, that search is drawing some comparisons to the massive manhunt for the Boston Marathon bombing suspects back in 2013.
Divers are searching the water here in Lisbon. We're about a quarter mile away from that boat ramp where the suspect's car was found on Wednesday. And right now, law enforcement says they don't know whether or not he's in the water. As cities and towns in Maine remain in lockdown, hundreds of local, state, and federal law enforcement officials are working together to locate suspected shooter Robert Card.
So you have every available asset that's deployed, not just bodies, not just warm bodies, but you have expertise in all these different aspects of the investigation.
Retired Massachusetts State Trooper Todd McGee says each of the agencies involved in this investigation brings a unique perspective.
U.S. Marshals that are experts in tracking down fugitives. You have the resources of the FBI with all of their capabilities. You have other New England state police agencies. You have other New England municipalities for the foot and ground search. So they've covered every possible base.
The massive manhunt drawing comparisons to the days-long search for the Boston Marathon bombing suspects, when ultimately one man was killed and the other taken into custody.
This coordinated effort is on a massive scale, and I believe that's probably the biggest lesson learned from the Boston Marathon response in that investigation.
But he says now law enforcement is facing some unique challenges.
Difference is that our area where we had those lockdowns was a much more condensed area. Even though it was over multiple cities, you don't have the remote nature like you do in Maine in this particular case.
And in this area, law enforcement is also using a helicopter and sonar and conducting a line search of the riverbank as they attempt to locate that suspect and end the shelter-in-place orders. In Lisbon, I'm Gabrielle Caracciolo.
As part of their efforts to find Robert Card, law enforcement officials are also turning to the public for help, setting up a new tip line today that's already had hundreds of reports come in. The I-Team's Dan Lamparello is at the live desk with what's come in so far and how those tips could help. Dan.
Well, Marissa, there have been a few tip lines set up during this investigation so far, but today they were consolidated into one on the FBI's website. You can get to it right now by following the QR code at the bottom of your screen. Law enforcement reiterating today that no tip is too small. If there's something you saw that you thought was suspicious, even if you think investigators might already know about it, it's still worth taking the time to submit that information and put it on their radar. Now, those tip lines, like the one set up today, have been pivotal in manhunts across the country. That includes the Boston Marathon bombing back in 2013. You just heard about some of the likeliness and some of the comparisons to that. Now, law enforcement expert Betsy Smith, who talked to the I-Team today, says the information that came from the public during that time in 2013, in the end, helped officers get to the bottom of what really happened.
The way that all played out, the cops, and we've interviewed them, were getting real-time information from those tip lines. The community was incredibly helpful in that Boston Marathon bombing case and the ultimate shootout. And I think now, and this is one of the things too about Maine, their people really say, Maine supports their law enforcement officers.
And that support, she says, is key right now. Again, the tip line is at the bottom of your screen, and you can not only submit written tips, but you can also upload any photos and videos you might have as well. We just heard from the commissioner saying hundreds have already been submitted so far since it was launched earlier this morning. Marissa?
Good information. Dan, thank you. Let's go back now to the new details we're learning after this latest briefing from law enforcement.
Yeah, we do want to go out live to CBS 13's Mal Meyer. He was at that briefing. Mal, again, a lot of focus on the timeline from Wednesday night, the lifting of these shelter-in-place orders, and on the victims as well. What can you tell us?
Yeah, exactly right. We covered all of that during the press conference, which just ended a few minutes ago. We're also getting a new look at all 18 victims of the mass shooting. The state police providing photos that had been given to them from the family members of the victims, and we were able to see those displayed during that press conference just a short time ago. Effective immediately, and I know that we just got some notices to our phones, an alert that the shelter-in-place order is being lifted, except for a few specific areas that won't be allowed hunting. But the public safety commissioner said that just because this order is being rescinded at this time does not mean that we should be dropping our guard. The manhunt is still ongoing, especially by the Androscoggin River today. I asked the public safety commissioner if there is reason to believe that the suspect may have gotten another vehicle or gotten in a boat and gone down the river. He said that they are not ruling out anything. And then another reporter asked if a boat was still missing, and the commissioner replied that he wasn't able to answer that at this time. We're also getting a better picture of how quickly this all unfolded and the massive law enforcement response that followed. We were told by the public safety commissioner that just a minute after or so the first call was made to the bowling alley, that officers who were actually nearby in the area responded quickly to that scene. Then about 10 minutes later is when the shooting happened at the bar and grill. Now, again, the search for Robert Card, the suspect in this mass shooting, continues. In state police say they are not ruling out any specific area at this point. We're also getting a better description of Card that may be helpful for people to understand. He is described as 5'11". He weighs 230 pounds. He has brown hair and brown eyes. And as we saw in the photos that have been shared publicly from law enforcement, he was wearing a brown hoodie and dark cargo pants. So if you see him, if you see anything suspicious, you are still asked to call police right away. Reporting live in Lewiston, Mel Meyer, CBS 13 News.
All right. Mal, thank you very much. Live in Lewiston with the update there. And coming up next, Lewiston Strong.
How the community is coming together to begin healing after Maine's worst mass shooting. As the people of Lewiston deal with this tragedy, many are expressing themselves by posting signs.
CBS 13 photojournalist David Hill spent the day in Lewiston exploring the meanings behind these messages of generosity, strength, and hope.
It's a tough time. It's heartbreaking. I never thought I'd be that person to be holding a sign that says, you know, Lewiston strong. I felt the need to come out and support my community. This is where I live. Every day, I try to show as much love as I possibly can.
Some of the guys from the recovery house put this together so that we could show support for what's going on. Even through tough times like this, we're going to fight to stay together. We're going to try to connect with the community. We're going to try to help each other. Saw that there was going to be a bunch of families that were going to be in need right off the bat. We thought we got to do something. We decided to incorporate the main part and the Lewiston Strong together and get a t-shirt project going. So we're selling t-shirts and hats with all the proceeds going directly to the families. And we just feel like it's something that we wanted to give back to the community. It shows that we're not giving up. It is a strong community. It's a tight-knit community.
Makes me feel hopeful.
Tonight, a mass shooting suspect still nowhere to be found.
Stories from loved ones now emerging.
Losing one would have been hard enough, but losing both of them is just awful.
What we know about the 18 killed in Lewiston and the community hit hard.
I keep telling myself, he's not ready. Just get back. He got his friend back. He got a job to run.
The search for a mass shooting suspect continues, and tonight police are identifying all 18 people who lost their lives.
Now, just a short time ago, state police identified all of those victims killed in the 2 mass shootings in Lewiston Wednesday night. They range in age from 14 to 76, including a couple who both died.
And some tense scenes from above in Durham today as police search for suspect Robert Card. Police with guns drawn, questioning people with their hands on their heads. One woman putting her arms up in the air.
A woman and a child walking on a trail, coming face to face with armed officers too. The woman seemed consoling the child, apparently shaken by that encounter as well. And video also showing police going home to home, questioning people as they continue to search multiple locations.
Our team coverage continues tonight from the latest that state police are sharing in Lewiston to the stories of victims, survivors, and communities being shared tonight.
Let's send it over to CBS 13's Mal Meyer. He's following the latest on the manhunt for Robert Card and what state police just shared a short time ago, Mal.
Yeah, we had that update just a few minutes ago, really. It just ended with the State Department of Public Safety. We heard that this search has been extensive from on the ground to in the air and in the water, especially today. We were hearing that a lot of dive teams were being used to search, and the Department of Public Safety commissioner is telling us that that search, especially in the river, is going to be continuing today and tomorrow at this point. We also asked, and I asked the Department of Public Safety Commissioner if there was reason to believe that the suspect, Robert Card, had obtained any kind of other vehicle or a boat and may have gone down river. The commissioner replied that they're not ruling out anything quite at this point. Another reporter then followed up asking if a boat was missing. The commissioner replied he couldn't answer that at this time. We know that authorities have been going door to door, and that was part of the update that we received a short time ago, that they will be going to some places and that people should be aware of that sometimes a group or a small group of officers may be coming to your door, may be asking questions as part of this larger manhunt, which continues to expand at this point. We're also getting a better understanding of what people should be on the lookout. We're getting a better description of Card. He is being described as 5'11", 230 pounds with brown hair and brown eyes. They again displayed his license photo during that press briefing that just wrapped up again a few minutes ago. So people are asked to be on the lookout for him. Take a look at his photo and make sure you're able to recognize him. If you see anything suspicious, people are being asked again to please contact law enforcement if they have any reason to believe that they've seen something suspicious or may know anything about this case. You should be contacting law enforcement right away. Reporting live in Lewiston, Mel Meyer, CBS 13 News. Back to you in the studio.
All right, important information, Mel. Thank you. And we're also learning more tonight about the victims. A father and a son from Winthrop included. They were at their bowling alley there Wednesday night when they were shot and killed by that gunman. CBS 13's Brad Rogers joins us live in Winthrop. And Brad, that is another community hit hard by these senseless shootings.
You know, it really is. There's such a ripple effect to this shooting here, and you've got at least 4 families here who have lost people in that shooting, one of the 18 people that they've lost in this shooting. Now that includes, first off, we got a father and son who was wounded in the attack. He lost a couple of close friends as well. Then you've got a high school student who lost his uncle in one of the shooting attacks, and a local teacher rather, who lost a very close friend. Not to mention, of course, the father and his teenage son, who were both shot and killed in the bowling alley.
Among the first people killed by the gunman Wednesday night were 44-year-old Bill Young and his 14-year-old son, Aaron.
Losing one would have been hard enough, but losing both of them is just awful.
Kayla Putnam lost her stepdad and younger brother. She says the two of them like to go bowling together. She still can't believe they're gone.
I mean, I'm still having moments now every 5 minutes. I'm like, this can't be real.
She says Aaron was the baby of the family. He was a freshman at Winthrop High School.
He gave the best hugs. He was such a sweet kid, never talked bad about anybody or anything, and he was an honor student.
This kid has been in schools since kindergarten here, so I think that the ripple effect is beyond our comprehension.
As for Kayla's stepdad, she says he was the rock of the family, the one everyone would turn to in times like these.
He was, anchor of the family, just a great guy. He's going to be very, very missed, and it's very hard to cope without him right now.
Winthrop Superintendent Jim Hodgkin posted this. Sadly, we have learned that a freshman at the high school and his dad are among the victims that were killed. Additionally, the uncle of another high school student was also killed. This is a tremendous tragedy for our area, our town, our students, and everyone. My heart is broken by this.
Everyone was someone's son, daughter, brother, sister, parent.
Kayla is especially worried about her mom, who right now is distraught over the loss of her husband and son.
How's your mom doing?
Devastated. Just absolutely devastated.
It's just so hard to imagine what that family is going through here, and our hearts certainly go out to them as well. Now, local schools will be back open again on Monday after being off on Thursday and Friday. That includes here in Winthrop. They will have a 2-hour delay for school, and they will have crisis counselors on hand as well to talk to the students. In fact, part of that 2-hour delay is so counselors can talk to teachers first before they welcome the students back to school. We're live in Winthrop. Brad Rogers, CBS 13 News. Greg and Marissa.
All right, Brad, thank you.
A CMMC doctor who worked on patients injured in the mass shooting is now speaking out and sharing her experience.
Here's what we know about those hospitalized so far. 3 still fighting for their lives in critical condition. 1, we're told, is in stable condition.
CMMC said this afternoon that 2 were expected to be discharged sometime today. 1 was discharged yesterday and another was transferred to Mass General Hospital yesterday as well. Dr. Lauren Adey, the chief of orthopedics at CMMC, worked on some of the patients. She says she had teams of 2 doctors in rooms of 3 to 4 at a time tending to those injured. She's describing what she saw.
Severe blast injuries. Anytime someone's hit, it's hard to not hit a bone somewhere. So our job is handling the bone and soft tissue, vascular injuries, injuries we needed a plastic surgeon for, general surgeon, trauma surgeon, orthopedics, all working together and just figuring out what you needed to do with that particular patient at that time. Some injuries are more severe than others, and they're starting the recovery process, and some will require multiple surgeries, and it may be quite a while for them.
She says this is the first time she's ever had to deal with a mass casualty event on this scale. In all, 13 people were injured.
Now, the survivor of the shooting is back home in Winthrop, recovering from a gunshot wound to his leg. Steve Kretlow, who is deaf, was at Schmenge's Bar and Grill He saw the gunman and was then shot in the leg. Now, his two best friends, who are also deaf, they were shot and killed. Today, our Brad Rogers spoke with Kretlow's mother-in-law.
How's Steve doing? How's the family doing?
Taking one day at a time. It's very raw. It's very emotional right now. He is an emotional wreck. He lost his best friends. It's a scary thing, and this is not normal. This is awful.
Now, Brad also spoke with Kretlow off camera. He says he broke down in tears speaking about his friends. Kretlow declined to share any more details about the gun murder, the shooting, due to the ongoing investigation.
The tragedy in Lewiston is hitting the deaf community especially hard. Police say 4 of the people killed Wednesday were a part of that community. CBS 13's Asia Reed joins us now live. And Asia, you spoke with some folks who knew them.
Marissa, 3 members of the deaf community, it's been confirmed, died that night at Schmenge's bar. One of those victims is Brian, and I spoke to one of his friends earlier today, and she said that he moved to Maine just recently for a new job. She says that his first day on the job was just 1 day prior to the shootings.
He and I would talk to each other almost every day. The last time he called me was 4 days ago. So he started and learned his big dream.
Vicky Ash lives in North Dakota and says she first met Brian McFarland through a deaf truckers group. She says he had his commercial driver's license and had a passion for trucking.
He loved his truck. He loved his trucking.
Ash says he just recently moved to Maine to pursue his dream of working on a farm. Wednesday, she saw on social media there was a shooting in Lewiston and tried to reach her friend.
That's my friend. I told him, "You okay?" Didn't hear from him. I thought maybe it's okay. Cause I panicked. I called him. I FaceTime. I called him. He said, "Please answer the phone."
Through social media, Ash discovered that McFarland had been shot and killed at Schmenge's bar.
Did you want to believe it? I was at the liar.
Executive Director of the Maine Educational Center for the Deaf and Hard of Hearing, Karen Hopkins, says this is hitting their community hard.
We have lost some wonderful, important members of the community. So please give us some time to process this, sometimes some space, and give us primarily access to what is happening.
Ash can say the same in trying to grapple that her close friend has died.
I kept telling myself, he passed away happy because we're back. He got his friend back. He got the job he wanted.
Other members of the deaf community here in Maine told me that they are still in the early stages of mourning the losses of these victims. Live in Lewiston, Asia Reed, back to you guys.
All right, Asia, so important again. Thank you so much. We did want to put a focus here tonight on the victims, to hear their stories, learn their names, show their faces, and we wanted to start off with that tonight. But obviously another big focus today has been that manhunt, especially focused tonight along the Androscoggin River in Lisbon.
Dive teams were sent into the water near where Robert Card's vehicle was abandoned. The I-Team's Dan Lamparello is at the live desk with what they may be looking for. And Dan, water searches like this can be very difficult.
Yeah, Marissa, that's exactly what our law enforcement sources are telling us tonight. There's a lot of coordination that goes into water searches, and those officers and divers have to be pretty methodical so they don't miss anything. Teams from the state and region were searching the Androscoggin River this afternoon by air and by boat on top of the water, looking for anything related to Robert Carr. You can see a diver in that video there as well. A diving robot was used as well today, using sonar to see what was on the riverbed below. And seeing in that river is what one law enforcement expert tells the I-Team is the most difficult part of this because of how quickly it may be moving. When you have a river and a body of water involved in a search like this, what level does that take things, and does it create any more difficulty?
Well, it is when we think about underwater recovery teams, dive teams, and just in general, when you think about scuba diving, you know, you might think of a vacation in the Cayman Islands and clear, beautiful water. What these divers are having to deal with is cloudy, murky, cold water, and they are looking for sometimes the smallest of things. It's not just a body that they're looking for, but we have to think about, did he dump those firearms? Did he dump ammunition? Did he dump other things in these bodies of water that the divers are searching for? And this is, again, this is not a fun task. And we also have to remember that there's some physical risk to doing this.
And to reduce that risk, the owners of 2 dams in that section of the river did help lower their gates to bring down the speed of the current today. We're told dive teams will actually be entering the water again tomorrow, and we're told there's good weather expected. That should be able to get a good amount of area covered as well. Greg, over to you.
All right, thank you, Dan. Important to know that as well. Hey, we wanted to share this, just a poignant moment. Today, the high school in Windham, they're showing their support for the Lewiston community.
Windham High School writing Lewiston on their football field. It can be seen there, you see, written in bold blue letters.
That is powerful to see. The Windham Police Department posting this photo on their page on Facebook.
Up next, you may have remembered him during the pandemic. A deaf interpreter is among those killed in this mass shooting.
Maine's former CDC director is remembering him.
After almost 2 days under shelter in place, Lewiston residents are now allowed outside. The impact of that order over the last 48 hours and what comes next.
As we mentioned, this tragedy is hitting Maine's deaf community extremely hard. It's a very connected group of people, and we've now learned members of that community were among those gunned down.
The tribute's really been pouring in for the beloved interpreter Joshua Seal. His wife says he was taking part in a cornhole tournament for deaf athletes when he was killed.
Dr. Nirav Shah had this to say about Seal, quote, I marveled at his ability to interpret what we were saying at light speed.
Dr. Shaw adding that he will be forever missed and always remembered as part of Maine's history.
A volunteer kids bowling coach, a high school freshman and his father, and the heroes who fought back.
Yeah, with each passing hour, we are learning more about the people who lost their lives Wednesday night. Now, here are 10 of the 18 who we're learning about this evening. Joseph Walker, he was the manager at that bar. His father says he died trying to stop the suspect with a butcher knife.
And again, Joshua Seal, who was taking part in a deaf cornhole tournament in Lewiston. According to his wife, Seal was a beloved sign language interpreter, as we said, often seen there interpreting the governor's COVID-19 updates.
And Beth Ironworks says that 40-year-old Peyton Brewer Ross also killed at the deaf cornhole tournament there at Schmege's Bar and Grill. And Arthur Strout's father says his son also killed at that bar. He says he dropped off his son there just minutes before those shots rang out.
Bob Violet was retired and devoted his free time to coaching kids learning to bowl. His youth bowling league was practicing at the bowling alley when he was killed. Ron Morin's, family tells us and tells the BDN that he was gregarious and upbeat guy. He also died in the shootings. Trisha Aslan's sister was bowling with her at Just-in-Time Recreation when the shooting started. She says her sister was calling 911 when she was killed. And Brian McFarland was a member of the deaf community, also killed there at Schmege's Bar and Grill. Finally, a father and his teenage son from Winthrop, Bill Young, and his son Aaron gunned down in the rampage at Just-in-Time Recreation. Just a short time ago, officials announcing the shelter in place has been lifted almost 2 days since residents were told to stay home, inside, lock their doors. Many businesses also closed their doors. Very trying, almost 48 hours. CBS 13's Anna Kuhn joining us now live in Lewiston. Anna, now that this order has been lifted, what does this mean for people there?
Well, Greg, Marissa, over the last 2 days, many residents have been forced to drive a fairly far distance to get supplies like food and medicines, and most grocery stores and pharmacies have been closed. Now, tomorrow, that could change if some businesses decide to open back up, but it's been a big stressor over the last 2 days.
Hoping that this is over as soon as possible, but we're working our way through it.
Lewiston residents have been sticking together, but physically staying apart.
I've seen a lot of people online offering, look, if you can't get out, let me know. I'll go get you something. I'll go get you prescriptions or food. And
Bob Tibbetts says he knew multiple victims killed or injured on Wednesday night, and in a close-knit community, that's true for many.
It's going to be different here without Trish. There's nobody that can fill her shoes. It's a big loss for the community.
Community members grieving have been turning to social media to check in on their neighbors.
And I know for our neighborhood, who again on our neighborhood Facebook page, people are talking and chatting, keeping up, and everybody's checking on each other. And but people really are sheltering in place still here.
And again, that shelter-in-place order has been lifted here. So tomorrow we may see some businesses, grocery stores, and pharmacies opening back up to the public. But that will be at the discretion of each individual business owner, since, of course, many here are still on edge with that suspect still on the loose. Live in Lewiston, Anna Kuhn, back to you guys.
Anna, thank you. With so many law enforcement officers in the woods of Maine right now, hunting season is scheduled to start tomorrow.
Yeah, understandably, though, a lot of folks are wondering if this is still a good idea with that massive manhunt still underway.
We just heard a new update on hunting just minutes ago. CBS 13 Sports Director Dave E. joins us now live. Dave, what is the latest? I know you just talked to the Department of Inland Fisheries and Wildlife. What do they have to say?
Yeah, that's right, Marissa and Greg. Hunting season is scheduled to begin tomorrow morning at sunup. However, moments ago, Mike Soschek from the Department of Public Safety said as of right now, the hunting has been suspended for just 4 towns, Lewiston, Lisbon, Monmouth, and Bowdoin. Hunting is allowed for all other Maine towns. Now, earlier today, we headed out to Three Cousins Firearms in Lewiston, spoke with Dan and Trevor Brooks. Both agree a delay for these towns is a good idea.
Personally, I think it's a good idea until this is all solved. I just, I think that if he were alive and he was in the woods, he still may have a weapon, and it would be an opportunity for him to shoot some innocent people that are walking deer hunting.
We have helicopters in the area with thermal vision. Having thousands of hunters in the woods is going to impede that. Gunshots, people are going to be nervous in their home. They don't know if someone's hunting in the backwoods. I heard a gunshot. It's going to send law enforcement everywhere.
Yeah, and Mike went on to say that if folks do hear gunshots, it could very well be from a hunter, but to always remain vigilant and cautious. Reporting live in Lewiston, I'm CBS 13's David. Guys, back over to you.
Yeah, an important reminder, Dave. Thank you.
And we'll be right back.
A quick look at our 7-day forecast. The warm temperatures hang around for one more day. Temps will be in the 70s, low 50s on Sunday with a lot of clouds. Next round of rain moves in Sunday night. It's going to rain on Monday, and the mountains will be dealing with some snow that day. Wednesday, that bears watching. That storm system could bring us some rain and snow. It all depends on the track, but it will get cooler.
Charlie, thanks. The CBS Evening News is coming up next.
We expect them to have more on what's happening, obviously, here in our great state of Maine, and we'll have more at 7 o'clock. In the meantime, I want to leave you with a hopeful message.